Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm Billy Ballas, your host, and joining me today, we have a special interview. We're taking a slight break in action from our usual roster rundowns of my quarter-century rosters, and I'm interviewing a two-time winner of the Best Play-by-Play Award from the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters, and a person who is recognized by Ballpark Digest for outstanding achievement in minor league baseball play-by-play. Alex Freedman, the play-by-play broadcaster of the AAA Oklahoma City Dodgers, is joining me. Alex, great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Doing well, Billy. Appreciate you inviting me on and just really looking forward to talking some baseball.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. Um, as a AAA broadcaster, now that's your main job, but as I understand it, you have several other job duties in
Yeah.
AAA, don't you? Right. So when the season is going on, what is a normal workday for you like there in AAA?
Yeah, so my formal title is Director of Communications and Broadcasting. So really overseeing all of our communication efforts, both from the baseball side and the non-baseball side. Our department consists of a grand total of two people. So it's myself, the other half, our communications manager, Lisa Johnson. So I've been with the team for 8 years. She's been with 7. So we've worked together for a long time now. We do have someone who will join us on a seasonal basis. So someone who typically has graduated from college just because of the time commitment involved, but really kind of that step in between, say, a summer internship and that first full-time job. So during the season, we are really inundated with the baseball information side of things. So the daily game notes when we're at home, furnishing stats, rosters, lineups, all that stuff to the press box, to the clubhouses, and working with the coaching staffs to meet their specific needs if there's certain kind of stats or anything that they want. So overseeing all that, and at the AAA level, you have roster changes aplenty, especially in the Dodgers organization. I imagine a lot of your listeners are Dodgers fans, so they're certainly not a stranger to that. And I'm the one who oversees the roster management. By that, I mean, of course, I'm not making any decisions, but I have a contact with Los Angeles Dodgers Player Development Department. We basically check in every single day because it's my job to submit the official roster to our league, the PCL, to minor league baseball, as well as the opposing team. So 25-man roster. To my knowledge, even though we weren't able to play this year, we were still going to stay at 25 this year, even though the big leagues was going up to 26. Now, whether that changes in forthcoming years, I'm not sure yet. But 25-man roster, and of course, it is largely dependent on the needs of the big league team. That's the main goal of the minor leagues, AAA all the way down to rookie ball, is to help the big league team win and to help develop players. So there are, a lot of pros and cons that come along with that. You see a lot of guys who, of course, have played in the big leagues, a lot of really good players who are going to be in the big leagues. But that the roster could change in an instant. And of course, always monitoring what's happening with the LA Dodgers, in terms of how it could potentially affect our roster the next day. So always keeping tabs on that. Writing, like I said, the daily game notes, which is a 16 to 18 page document that tells you everything you need to know about that day, team trends, specific information about players, pitchers, season, miscellaneous stats, all that stuff that you could need and want for that day's game. So that changes every day. And
So
that's
now,
a 3 to 4 hour process every single day.
Do you have to write those game notes for both teams, or is it just the OKC Dodgers?
No, it's just for our team.
Okay.
So we're just doing all that, and we obviously they're put in the press box and all that stuff. They're sent out via email to our distribution list, but they're also put on our website so anyone can go read them. Then we'll do the post game recaps as well. So whether we're home on the road kind of depends who takes the lead on that, myself or Lisa, and handling all interview requests for players, coaches, as well as members of our front office. If it's maybe a story focusing on the non-baseball side or the business thing. And just in general, during the off season, I know you asked about the season specifically, but during the off season, of course, we're able to focus more kind of on the non-baseball side of public relations, whether it's, some off-season events we have. Of course, as we get closer and closer to the season, we typically have a few different season lead-up events that we're going to go out and promote. So overseeing that stuff, have a hand in our website, have a hand in our social media from a baseball-related content in both areas. But to answer your original question, a typical day during the season, most of our games are at 7 o'clock local time. My day will typically start around 10 a.m. You work on the game notes, you get that done by the early afternoon. Then, if we're at home, I'm doing that work in my office at the ballpark. If we're on the road, I'm doing the majority of that work from a hotel room. And then if we're on the road, myself and the coaching staff, we typically go to the ballpark around 2 o'clock. So just getting everything set up there, I'm preparing for the broadcast basically all day. That's the writing the game notes helps that process a lot, but it's just also, getting prepared, and you can only do so much until you know the lineup that day. And lineups are usually posted by both teams by 3 o'clock, under normal circumstances. Of course, you're going to have scratches and changes based on injuries or guys who are getting called up. But typically, they're going to be up around 3 o'clock, if not sooner. So really, it's just preparing for the game, getting everything in my scorebook the way I want it. Then typically finding someone to record and do my pregame interview with. If the team takes batting practice, just kind of going down around there and just kind of checking in with certain people if I have different questions. Usually always hanging out at some point before the game in our manager's office or in the coach's office if there are any questions or anything I want to learn before that day's game. We typically have in our clubhouse just a scouting report posted on the other starting pitchers, so that will help me out a little bit as well. So getting all that information, talking to the other team's broadcaster if there's any questions or any little nuggets to pick up from them. Try and shut it down around 6 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. Get something to eat, and then go on the air at 6:50. So 15-minute pregame show, the game itself, and then the postgame show as well. And if we're at home, like I said, Lisa will usually handle the postgame recap, but if we're on the road, it's usually me. So you have that, and then of course you have day games that follow night games sometimes. And in those cases, we have late nights. We stay up and crank out a lot of stuff ahead of that day game to get ahead for the next day. So definitely you're at the mercy of the schedule, however it is, whether it's travel or day games, night games, all that stuff. So very long-winded answer to your question, but and I'm sure I've forgot a few different things, but that's kind of the general gist of it.
Yeah, no, that sounds like quite a long day with a lot on your plate. Obviously, there's a lot of talking that goes in along with your job and your position. Do you do anything to keep your vocal pipes ready to go to make sure you're not hoarse or anything?
Yeah, every morning starts with a few cups of hot tea, green tea to be specific, and that's even during the off season too. So I'm not a coffee drinker, but I do drink caffeine probably more than I should, especially in the form of diet soda during the season. I don't really drink it a whole lot during the off season. So doing that, and also every morning also starts with some cough drops as well, whether it's sore or not. Just kind of maintenance, and honestly, don't try and talk a whole lot, during the day during the season.
Save those bullets, right?
Right, exactly, because it's just me. And yeah, it's. I've been fortunate where I've never really had my voice go during a game. There's been one or two close calls, but was good to go the next day.
So now, unfortunately, with the pandemic, minor league baseball has been a casualty of that. And, without those long work days, how are you keeping busy during this pandemic?
Well, for the first few months, most of us were working from home and working normal business hours. And really, it was a challenge for not only our organization, but every minor league organization to find ways to get creative, whether it was ways to generate revenue, ways to generate content. So one of the things I did was start to do an interview series over Zoom with some of our players and coaches or alumni and put that on our social media. Also worked with our main game presentation person to air some notable games we've had the last couple of years. So kind of working on the cut downs and edits on that. So doing that stuff, and of course still overseeing our communication efforts. Of course, like I'm sure many teams, we knew that a few different scenarios were possible, and we wanted to be prepared for them. So just having communications ready for scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. So working on that. In the state of Oklahoma, we were able to start hosting events at our ballpark beginning in early June. So we've had a few different kind of events. We've had a couple of high school graduations. We've also had quite a lot of travel and amateur showcases and tournaments. So organizations like Perfect Game, Five Tool Baseball, Big Fire. So we've had a ton of that happening. But because of the situation, of course, it was us, the full-time staff, to fill the jobs that on a regular Dodgers game day would be filled by game day staff. So I had got plenty of experience working at our concession stand, working at the Dippin' Dots card, working the scoreboard, working the music, and all that stuff. So that kept me busy. And unfortunately, myself and a lot of my coworkers, especially in the non-revenue side, not too long after the season was officially canceled, furloughed from our positions, which it's unfortunate, but a reality of the situation. No, it's nothing personal. We saw 70% of our full-time staff either get furloughed or unfortunately be laid off in some certain instances. So I know I'm going to be back eventually, and as the time we're recording this, it's just been a little bit over a week, but I've found ways to keep myself busy for sure during this time. I've taken in a few different foster dogs. So that's kept me busy. I do live by myself, though it's nice having those companions and be able to do a good service for them as well. And definitely some projects that are on the horizon for me as well, one of which is improving my Spanish speaking skills, which has been on my to-do list for years and years and years. And another which is just kind of doing some stuff to help hopefully further my career.
All right. Now, you grew up in St. Louis, correct?
That is correct.
And went to school at Northwestern in Chicago, I understand.
Yep, you got it.
So, were you, a big baseball fan growing up, or were you a sports fan growing up? Who were your teams growing up, essentially?
Yeah, baseball was always my favorite sport. My dad likes to joke that he never forced anything on his kids, and he had two of them, myself and my brother. But the one thing he made a conscious effort to expose them to was baseball. So he grew up in Southern Illinois, a big Cardinals fan as well. In St. Louis, obviously, you grow up as a Cardinals fan, unless you have a parent or grandparent who's a fan of a different team. So I was a huge Cardinals fan growing up. I mean, we'd go to Busch Stadium all the time. And that was my favorite sport. I'd watch the other ones, but baseball was really the one I enjoyed the most and played the most. So yeah, that was baseball's always been my number one.
So then now, since you grew up as a Cardinals fan, how has it been working for, different parent organizations? Do you still have those Cardinal loyalties? Are you fans of the teams that you worked for? How does that work? Especially, as a minor league announcer, sometimes, they can change affiliate from year to year.
Yep.
So yeah, how has your fandom changed, if it has at all?
Oh, it's changed a lot for sure. And a lot of people are surprised to hear I don't care about the Cardinals anymore. They're just another team to me. Of course, I know a lot about them, especially because they have an affiliate in our league in Memphis that we play a lot. And I'll still see stuff on social media, or if I'm on the phone with my dad or my brother, they'll talk about certain things, and a lot of time I just have to take their word for it because I can't pay as much attention to it. But the line I tend to use is when you work this kind of job, and it is different for someone like myself who's traveling and always with the team, as opposed to, say, someone who might work in minor league baseball but on the sales side or a different department. You become a fan of people instead of teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the people that you develop relationships with, and of course your parent organization at the AAA level, because so much of their success will reflect on your team, both directly and indirectly. And you'll see so many of your guys go up and be contributors at the big league level. So, I've worked for teams that have had three different affiliates throughout my career. So my first one was an A-ball with the Mariners. And then at AAA, my first 3 years in Oklahoma City, affiliate with Houston before our partnership with the Dodgers began. So you're a fan of like I said, you're a fan of people, and you're a fan of the organization you work for. Those are where your allegiances lie.
Yeah, and hopefully now the Dodgers are have an ownership stake in the OKC Dodgers, correct? So hopefully that'll have some stability in terms of the affiliate.
I hope so. Definitely, yeah. It is a 50% stake, and which started in the fall of 2014. But there's a lot of talk, coming from the top of Major League Baseball. We could see radical realignment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and really, I don't know how that pertains to us at this moment. Of course, again, ownership is involved, but we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, for me, I absolutely have loved working with the Dodgers organization. Everything you hear about it is true, and aside from the fact that it would cause a lot of work for us, uh, not only from a baseball information standpoint, but for us, have to be a whole new rebranding standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even if you take that stuff out, there's no other organization I want to be affiliated with.
So now you mentioned that you were with the Mariners and A-ball, and now you're with the OKC Dodgers, formerly that Houston affiliate in AAA. What are some of the differences that you see between A-ball and AAA? With Seattle, was that the California League that you were in?
It was the High Desert Mavericks, who no longer exist. For those of your listeners who are in Southern California, based out in Victorville, so kind of that last stop on Interstate 15 until you hit straight desert all the way to Las Vegas. So yeah, I was out there for a few seasons. My first job out of college. Obviously there's some differences between A-ball and AAA, but I also want to preface this by saying so much has changed during that time. My first season being in 2007 to now here in 2020, so much has changed about the game, especially from a technology standpoint. But the basic ones and the obvious ones are the facilities are bigger. The facilities tend to be nicer. They're in bigger cities and towns. As a result, you have better access to food, better access to better accommodations for travel and hotels. Like, we bus or fly depending on the length of the trip, and we do fly commercial. So some people kind of raise their eyebrows when I say this. I prefer busing because you're able to just go whenever, and you don't have to get up early and change planes and all that stuff. When we bus, we have two buses, and they're nice. So you have that. You tend to have better hotels. In AAA, I've just kind of always felt that nothing will compare to the big leagues, but what happens in AAA matters more, at least from my perspective and the work I do, that it does at the A-ball level. You have more eyes on your team. You have more eyes on guys who could possibly be going up, especially if someone at the big league level gets hurt. So a lot of attention is paid to what is happening at AAA, much more than at the A-ball level. Another big difference is just the type of players that you have, especially veterans at the AAA level, whether it's they're veterans in the minor league sense or they're veterans in they have a significant amount of major league experience. So you have that as well, and just the way guys go about their business, um, not in how mature they are, how they carry themselves, how they interact with the media, how they interact with fans. It is just it's a noticeable difference as well. And of course, I talked about this earlier, the direct roster effects for both good and bad reasons, for ways to see guys make their big league debut. It's always a thrill. Sometimes if a guy gets told earlier in the day that he's going up to the big leagues, and I might be able to see him before he leaves and just congratulate him and all that stuff. Of course, a lot of times it might happen in the middle of the night. You don't get that chance, but especially if it's someone who's been around for a while, to be able to not only congratulate them yourself, but see how happy the teammates and coaches are for that person. And it's not quite the same as, say, in A ball when you get promoted to Double A, is when you're getting that call to the big leagues for the first time. And specifically, kind of with the Dodgers, they've made it very well known that they want the environment at AAA to mimic the environment in the big leagues as close as it can as possible to lessen any kind of transition gap. So what that means in terms of Oklahoma City, it's been adding coaches. We have this year would have been the first year we would have had a bullpen coach. It means in terms of the video setup they have, we have a dedicated video room in the clubhouse that has, I think, 4 or 5 stations that guys can look at their own at-bats. They can look at the opposing pitcher that night. They can find basically anything they want. And we have a video coordinator that goes there. We have it's called the development coach. They're kind of the analytically based coach of the coaching staff as well. And then the food that's provided, top of the line, catered. That's another huge difference between AAA and A ball for sure. Although I think most organizations are now realizing that they need to be better about providing good options for their minor leaguers at all levels. The Dodgers do that. But yeah, obviously the what we have is working with a local catering company in Oklahoma City for home games, and when we're on the road, it's almost always exclusively catered by like Whole Foods. So just making sure guys have great fuel to put in their bodies, and like I said, the amount of coaching staff, support staff at the AAA level, at A ball, and this is probably still the case for most places, but I think we've seen coaching staffs expand a little bit the lower levels in the minor leagues. When I was starting out, you had your manager, your hitting coach, your pitching coach, and a trainer. Maybe a strength coach, maybe not. And now here, we have the manager, the pitching coach, the hitting coach, the development coach, the bullpen coach, 2 athletic trainers, a strength and conditioning coach, a video coordinator, and then, of course, a host of people who are always coming into town from the player development staff and the major league front office as well.
So yeah, you mentioned how streamlined the Dodgers have it. I know I've read about some of that stuff, how they want it, pretty much all the levels aligned so that there's less of a culture shock when they jump from level to level. And when they get to the bigs, they're ready to go. Everything is the same language,
exactly,
given to them the same way.
Yep.
So, and, you read about the Dodgers having such a great player development program. Now, I know you've been with the Dodgers, you mentioned, since 2014. But prior to that with the Astros and the Mariners, I know that was a long time ago and maybe things have changed, but did you see any differences between the parent clubs that you've worked for?
I mean, you do, but like I said, so much of it, I think, has changed. It just would have changed with the times anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And just based on where those organizations were, both the Mariners back in the mid to late 2000s and the Astros at the beginning of this decade, or I should say last decade now, they were not in good spots, to be quite honest. So whereas the Dodgers, they've won the division for 7 straight years. They've been to the World Series a couple times since we've been affiliated with them. So that's been a huge difference in itself. But that's not any fault of, say, the player development system of Houston or Seattle. But I think that something that I kind of look back on now is I remember what would have been our final year with Houston 2014. Of course, they are known as a very analytically based organization, but I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it still was not. I think they really did a good job of kind of introducing it at the lower levels first when they got their guys in, because some of the guys who played for us 2012, 2013 were free agents or waiver claims. Is they were just looking for bodies and trying to fill a roster and stay afloat while they got their type of player in.
Mm-hmm.
And say what you want. What happened with the Astros? Obviously, not a great situation, but it was a remarkable turnaround. From the top from going from the bottom to the top, and we got to see a lot of that up close with guys coming through Oklahoma City. But sorry, I got on a little tangent there. But what I was going to say was 2014. That was the first time they had like a video intern, and it was like a kid with one or two handheld cameras that would focus on one or two specific things. Like, I don't even know if he took video during games. It was more during just BP or filming bullpens or stuff like that. And it wasn't anything like, the cameras that organizations use today, like the Repsodo or the Edgertronic or anything like that. I'm talking like literally just a handheld MIDI cam. And so just the way that the organization, that the technology has grown in the game since that time has been huge. I think for us going from the Astros to the Dodgers, something that I can speak on because I have seen it in subsequent Astros affiliates, is just the level of investment and the bodies that are involved. Like I said, as I mentioned, with the expanded coaching staff, with the amount of player development staff just in general throughout the Dodgers organization, it's definitely noticeable. And something that the Dodgers say, and this is not to compare them to the Astros and Mariners organizations, but I think all organizations say that they evaluate character. The Dodgers, it's not lip service, it's true. I mean, every single guy you encounter, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's a staff member, they're all just awesome people, great people to be around, creates a great environment. It's not 100% success rate. There have been literally two people I would say I did not care for. I wouldn't say that they were necessarily bad people by any means, but there were also guys who were older veterans who had come on either a waiver claim or a trade or stuff like that. And they're not in the organization anymore, but especially the guys they draft. I mean, I know makeup is something that all scouts evaluate, but you can tell it is such a big part of the Dodgers drafting philosophy and when they're looking at people to bring into their organization.
Yeah, that's a great point, and another reason why scouts are so necessary. I'm big on the stats and analyzing players that way, but
yeah,
I think you need to take everything into account. And as you're saying, it seems like the Dodgers definitely do, and that may be a reason why they've been so successful at developing players recently. Now, with such a that player development, who are I've explained this project to you that I was working on, and I have great players on several of these rosters over the past quarter century. But who are some of the players who you've seen recently who you think are going to make an impact? It could be with the Dodgers or it could be on other teams that you've seen as well. So who are some of the names that you are looking out for to make a big impact at the big league level, in the next 5 or 10 years?
Sure, yeah, and full disclosure, for to the listeners, Billy did send me some topics he wanted to discuss. This was by far the hardest one, and that's why scouting is so hard. And I am not a scout or an expert by any means, but some of the guys, I feel that I've seen beyond the Dodgers organization, just that I've seen within the AAA level and the PCL. Guy I was a huge fan of last year before he got called up was Keston Hiura of the Milwaukee Brewers, playing with San Antonio. To me, I thought he was Ian Kinsler 2.0, just watching him. And he obviously had a great run in the big league levels as well. I think this guy is going to hit a lot for a long time. Another one was Yordan Alvarez of the Astros and Round Rock before that, before he got called up, just putting up stupid video game numbers in AAA, and just seemed like if you got him out, it was almost, I don't want to say lucky, but the baseball gods were on your side if you were able to get him out. Uh, Other guys one who was a Dodger, and I think if he's able to stay healthy, and that's such a big part of all of this is just staying healthy.
Right.
Guy, I think Alex Verdugo. I think if he's able to get that in everyday spot, the big league level, whether it's with the Red Sox or somebody else, and stay healthy, it's a little scary for him to have a back injury like he's had, and hopefully he's going to be healthy and get over it. He's a guy who I'd call a hitting savant before. You shouldn't be able to do at his young of age of what I've seen him do in the past, and being able to make contact and judge the strike zone and all that stuff. So that a guy who's already starting to show it, and I think is going to be obviously a frontline starter for a long time. Jack Flaherty with the Cardinals, saw him with Memphis. He had a 14 strikeout game against us once. Another guy from Memphis and who's been up with the Cardinals but hasn't had quite the success, but I think he can, is Dakota Hudson. Some guys in the Marlins organization, even though he's been in the big leagues for a little bit, Brian Anderson, was their third baseman. Got to also give him a little shout out because he's from Oklahoma City. And Isan Diaz, who got called up at the end of last year, their second baseman. A guy who, pitcher in the A's organization, one of their former first-round picks, A.J. Puck. We saw him coming out of the bullpen with Las Vegas last year. I know the plan is for him to at least begin the year in the A's rotation, but throwing upper 90s, from the left side, 6'7", huge wingspan. It gets on guys quick. It was pretty nasty to see. Another Dodger who I've always loved his bat. I know there's some other questions about other things, but Edwin Rios, I think, is another guy who, if he's able to get every day at bats, whether it's with the Dodgers or somebody else, that he's going to produce. He always has throughout his career. Even if he last year he got off to a miserable start. There's no other way to put it. But the numbers at the end of the year were still really good. He was able to overcome that. So yeah, and like I said, another one who I thought, and this is no knock against him, a guy who I was really impressed by, and he's impressed a lot of people, is Dustin May. But he's just so young and hasn't had much experience yet. And not only, especially with pitchers, but all players, as I said before, just the injury risk. You just don't know.
Right.
And of course, you hope guys' careers aren't derailed by injuries. But it's just so hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, and a lot of the names you mentioned, I think they are, they've been pretty highly regarded as prospects. Have there been any players that you've seen in AAA or even maybe in High A that were not necessarily considered prospects, but then just somehow, made an impact and kind of came out of nowhere at the big league level? I know, the Dodgers, I can think of a couple names off the top of my head, guys who kind of came out of nowhere. Do you have any experience with some of those guys?
Well, let's start with Max Muncy,
yeah.
Who, granted, was a prospect in the A's organization, but really didn't. When we would face him when they were affiliated with Nashville, he never really did anything to wow you. He got some time up with Oakland, and obviously his numbers weren't great. But then in 2017, the Dodgers pick him up, and he had a good year. I mean, he had a good year in Oklahoma City, but nothing which would have made you think what was to come at the big league level. And I just remember that offseason, I was so surprised because he had again, really good AAA season. I figured he was going to get a lot of free agent interest, whether it was as a major league contract, whether it was as a minor league contract with an invite to spring training. But he decided to re-sign with the Dodgers in that exclusive window between the time our season ended and before the World Series ended. And I just remember thinking, man, I'm surprised he didn't try and test the market a little bit more. But of course, it was a great move for him. Great guy. Loved having him around. We usually sat by each other on the bus that year. So Max is one of my favorites for sure, both as a player and a person. It's been awesome to see him go on and have the success that he's had. You look at arguably the best, or definitely within the top five starting pitchers, Jacob deGrom.
Mm-hmm.
When the Mets were affiliated with Las Vegas, and we saw him then, this would have been in 2013, I believe, and he didn't have great numbers then. He had not had great numbers from AA before he had gotten sent up to AAA. But man, saw him one night, 7 innings, beautiful, brilliant, mid 90s with movement, athletic delivery. And I have never heard scouts the next day rave about a player's performance the way that I heard them talk about Jacob deGrom the next day. I didn't think of course, after seeing one guy in person once, you're never going to think to yourself multiple Cy Youngs are going to come of it. But he's definitely one of them, because I think everyone, at least the bigger baseball fans, know this guy was primarily a college shortstop, I think,
Right.
9th round pick. So he was not considered, a top prospect at that time, and certainly now has established himself as one of the better pitchers in the game. Guys saw a lot of in Omaha, Whit Merrifield, who has had an incredible run with the Royals, and probably one of the most underrated players in the game. He would hit for average, but again, never really scared you when he was at the plate. But that's another guy who, again, had decent numbers, but never would have foreseen him having the success at the big league level. Kyle Hendricks with the Cubs, saw him a couple times with Iowa. A couple guys with the A's, Ramon Laureano, Matt Olson. Now, I know Olson was kind of a prospect, but his time in AAA and when they were in Nashville, never really put it together. Tommy Pham, guy in Memphis, saw from, I feel like, parts of several years, whether it was in Memphis, they know he had a lot of injuries. So bouncing there, AA, he was hurt, would go up for a little bit, come back. Marwin Gonzalez, a guy who played in Oklahoma City, who's really carved out a nice career for himself as a utility player in the big league level. And some of the guys that I went back in the archives to look at some of the A-ball guys I would have seen, one of which was David Freese. I saw him coming up in the Padres organization with Blake Elsinore, guy who was a fifth-year senior, who I remember way back when, solid numbers, but again, was not a top prospect. Guy who played for our team in High Desert, not Corey Seager, his older brother Kyle Seager. So I've called games for both Seager brothers in the minor leagues. Little fun fact there for you. But Kyle Seager, a relatively high draft pick, but was always kind of seen just as an average overpowered guy, nice little player, can probably, get to the big league at some point. But he had some really good seasons a few years ago with a lot of pop. I remember calling his power back in the late 2000s as sneaky pop, and it certainly developed into much more than that. And then another guys I was kind of looking back through other things who would have been with Modesto and the Rockies organization was Charlie Blackmon. Again, good player, but never really saw him come and become the player that he has.
Yeah, it must be great to see these players, and especially develop some relationships with them. Yeah, as you have with the Dodger players in the OKC Dodgers, and then see them go on to have great success in the big leagues. Like, you must be very happy for Muncy. You mentioned that, to see the success that he's had, especially coming out of nowhere like he did. But on the flip side,
that's one of the best parts of. Oh, I was just going to say that's one of the best parts of the job.
Yeah,
I alluded to a little bit when we were talking about the differences between AAA and A-ball, and that's definitely one of the best parts.
Now, on the flip side, you've probably seen a lot of great players, and you mentioned it before, in terms of you don't know how these are going to turn out because guys will have injuries. I know there's a saying, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect, because you can never predict what kind of injuries he might have and his body breaks down. So who are some players you may have seen that, you thought that they had a bright future ahead of them, but uh, for one reason or another, they just were not able to pan out? An injury seems like the most common reason that they were unable to make it. Were there any?
Yeah, some, and others just, who knows? And it's a little bit of a tough question to answer. To feel, I don't want to make it seem like
Right.
these guys were bad baseball players. They were still some of the best baseball players in the world, and a lot of them did get to the major leagues as well, but just didn't probably have the impact myself and a lot of others thought. One of which was Jimmy Paredes, who played for Oklahoma City my first year, 2012, set the single season team hits record. And again, yeah, he had time with Houston, a couple of other organizations, but just never really put it together. Another one during time, a couple of others during the time in Oklahoma City, the Houston days. John Singleton was one of them.
Right. Yeah. Cause
Got
he signed a
yeah,
major
got the
league deal,
contract,
right? Hmm.
got a contract before he appeared in the big leagues, and I can't play armchair psychologist and know what effect that did or did not have on him. But even with that out of the equation, I thought the guy who I thought was definitely gonna be a solid regular in the major leagues. Another guy in the Astros organization, Jared Cozart, might have come in the same trade with John Singleton from the Phillies to the Astros early in his career. But again, a guy who got to the big leagues, but just really didn't have much sustained success up there. Someone who's now in the Royals organization, outfielder by the name of Brett Phillips. And again, he's still young and has plenty of time. But I remember a couple of years ago when he was in the Brewers organization, and Colorado Springs, their affiliate, man, they just had a loaded team, and they had this outfield with him, Lewis Brinson, this guy Ryan Cordell. I know he's somewhere right now, but all three were considered huge prospects, and I thought Phillips was the best of the bunch, where most people thought it was Brinson. And really, for all three of them, there hasn't been any sustained big league success yet. Some guys who I think more so at the A-ball level that I saw, because at AAA you kind of have a better idea of who players are and all that. But
Hmm.
some names that I was going back from the A-ball level during my time in High Desert, Carlos Peguero, a huge, massive guy, big time power, and yeah, he got to big leagues for a little bit. Guy who was I believe led the minors in RBIs in 2010 in High Desert. Guy by the name of Rich Poitras. I'm not sure if he might have gotten to AAA eventually. Another guy who played on that same team was outfielder by the name of Yoherman Chavez, who I was just absolutely in love with. Big power, just chiseled, good outfielder, great arm, and I'm not sure he ever got past AA. A couple of pitchers, one of which was originally signed by the Dodgers and uh, did have good big league success eventually with Pittsburgh, but not for a long amount of time, was James McDonald.
Hmm.
Saw him early in his career at the A-ball level, and then a guy who's in the Giants organization, another pitcher by the name of Tim Alderson, who I myself and a lot of others thought was going to be great. I believe him and Madison Bumgarner were both taken in the first round of the same year by the Giants. But Alderson was kind of fast tracked a little bit more and thought he might have the higher ceiling at first, but after a couple of years, I think that opinion changed.
Yeah, it's so tough to predict. So many things have to go right for you to, to make it to the big leagues. And as you mentioned, even to play in the minors, you have to be so great, so talented. And just to make the majors, it's incredible at what those guys are able
Yeah.
to do.
I do
Um,
have one more, and the reason he made this list, but it's for very sad circumstances. But someone that I wanted to bring up was a guy by the name of Greg Hallman, who was in the Mariners organization. Uh, Grew up in the Netherlands, but saw him in High Desert within my first couple years, and the body comparison that I heard from scouts was Andre Dawson, and a guy potentially at his absolute ceiling. Could have been 20-20, 30-30 in the big leagues, maybe. And he did get to the big leagues, and I believe it was his last full season, did have a 30-some-odd homer season at AAA with about 20 steals, but unfortunately passed away in a family tragedy, just 24 years old. But he's someone I definitely think about of what could have been if that tragedy had not occurred.
Mm-hmm. So now, being in AAA, you have been exposed to that extra inning rule, which will be in use in this shortened Major League season this year. So what are your thoughts on it, and how has it affected games?
Well, I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug right now. I actually recently wrote a big article about this. We have a kind of a sister website. I don't know if you want to call it a blog or a secondary website for our organization that myself and Lisa we work on, called Beyond the Bricks. So medium.com/Beyond the Bricks, or you can find the link in my Twitter feed as well from a few weeks back. And when it was first introduced in 2018, I was like everybody else, all the national baseball types you see on Twitter making fun of it, saying it's a mockery of a game, this and that. The first game we ever had, just both managers had a double switch, and ended up that relief pitcher had to be the automatic runner the next inning, which it slipped by everybody. That didn't, I felt like it didn't help the case, but I kept watching the last 2 years, and now I'm a huge fan of it. I really am. It provides instant action, which in a extra inning games you might not get for quite some time. So each team starts off with an automatic scoring opportunity. Something I was afraid of that was going to happen was teams were just going to bunt and play for one, but it became very apparent that, especially if you're the visiting team, you can't do that. That one run a lot of time will not hold up. And I don't have the breakdowns in front of me, but I basically tracked what the results are for the OKC Dodgers games the last 2 years under these rules. If a team, even if they're not intentionally bunting and playing for one run, if they only score one run in the top of the inning, they win that game less than 50% of the time. So you really need to play for a big inning if you are the visiting team. And of course, there's just other elements of different strategy that comes into it, not only with, how are you going to approach the offense, but how it might dictate how you maneuver the lineup around. They did rectify that rule about, if the pitcher spot is supposed to be the automatic runner, you can now go to the spot before it in the lineup. And it's had a huge impact on reducing length of games. I have in that article the number of games provided by and the numbers provided by minor league baseball, and now it's like I think it's 75% of games end after no longer than 11 innings, and that might just actually be after 10 innings. But after 10 or 11 innings, it's very rare to see a game go past 11 innings now. And for AAA, it's especially a huge difference because sometimes your pitching may be thin just because of what happens at the big league level anyway. But it's just exciting. I think it's just exciting. And I also kind of drew a comparison to college football as well.
Mm-hmm.
That I think most people who watch the NFL and college football like college football's overtime better because you start with a scoring chance. And it's just kind of more of a back and forth, exciting thing. So I've enjoyed it. Again, I've gone from skeptic to a big fan of it. It's something I'd like to see in the major leagues permanently. To those people who say, well, now you won't have these memorable marathon extra inning games, to which my response is, how many of them are truly memorable? Not many, not a whole lot. And now it won't be in place in the postseason, which I agree with. I don't think it should be at any level. It hasn't been in the minor leagues, and it won't be in the big leagues. So you'll still have Max Muncy's walk-off in the 18th inning of Game 3 of the World Series. But I think, especially the way the game is played these days, with the reliance on bullpens, it makes sense to have at the big league level, because when a game goes 16, 17 innings, you burn through all your pitching. It doesn't just affect AAA. It affects the entire minor league system. And it might take days, possibly even weeks, to recover based on that. So I think also for player health and overuse, and also you can, if you have this in place, you can also avoid that situation where sometimes guys who might be effective but happen to have minor league options get optioned kind of as a sacrificial lamb. I think it could prevent that as well. So I see tons of benefits into it. I'd like to think once people start watching it, they'll become fans as well. There are very few people. In fact, I don't know of anybody who in the minor leagues who's seen it now for 2 years who's against it. So I think it's been great. Coaches like it, players like it. Um, I think it's very beneficial.
Now, in AAA, do you also have the pitch clock?
Yes.
And how is
And
the pitch
that,
clock?
I don't know. To me, it hasn't had a huge effect on games. I think part of it is because it's just really not enforced, and that's on the umpires to do that. You'll see 5, 6 violations called all year, and it's just very sporadic as to when they're enforced. That I'm still not sure on, because there was a dip that first year. It was introduced in 2015, but it's the time of the game has steadily gone up since then. So I'm still not sure how much of an effect the pitch clock has had. I think it's going to come down to enforcement. Probably can also come down to shortening the allotted amount of time in between pitches, or well, innings. I know is a tough, tricky issue because of ad revenue, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be shortened in certain areas too.
Now, what are some of, I know you've got some wild experiences. You mentioned, bus rides, commercial travel. What are some crazy experiences and stories that you've got from the minor leagues?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have your travel maladies, for whether you're in A-ball, whether you're in AAA, all that stuff. Whether it's canceled flights, whether it's the bus breaking down. Um, Once a couple years ago, we're busing to Iowa and just came along a car that was completely engulfed in flames alongside of the road. Last year had one of the more memorable travel stories I've ever had when we were busing back from San Antonio. For those listeners who are not familiar, there's a chain of gas stations primarily in Texas, but a couple in the bordering states called Buc-ee's. BUC-EE''S. It is the Walmart of gas stations, and that's not even doing it justice. It has, literally hundreds of pumps. They all also have all sorts of food and snacks that you can imagine. I mean, freshly prepared foods, from barbecue to bakery items to sandwiches to you name it. All sorts of trail mixes, chips. It really is a whole store in itself in there. So we always stop there, whether we're coming back from going to and from San Antonio or Round Rock, just because guys are always going to be able to find plenty of stuff to eat and have a few different options and all that. So we're coming back. We're in the town of Temple, Texas, and I'm walking out of the store back towards our buses, and I notice there's one cop car that's kind of slowly driving alongside a few feet to my left. And then I notice a few more in the vicinity. And the next thing I know, they now all have their lights on. Police officers are jumping out. They've surrounded this car and this U-Haul that are next to our buses. They pull their weapons, saying, "Let us see your hands." all that stuff. The guy who was in the U-Haul takes off on foot into the night. I have no idea what happened to him, if they caught him. I assume they caught him because really the direction he was running was towards the highway. And then there were two females in the other car. Eventually they came out, were cuffed. As we got the clear I was never scared. It was just kind of, I think all of us were just entertained more than anything, even though, weapons were drawn and all that stuff. It didn't really seem like it was a high threat situation or anything. And I think if it really was, they would have told us, to either get inside the buses or stay inside of the store. But yeah, it was something else. And as we were finally leaving, the two females were sitting on the curb in cuffs. And to this day, I still don't know what happened. I went on that town's website or newspaper's website to try and see anything, and didn't. My guess is either the U-Haul itself or the contents of the U-Haul were stolen, but I don't know. But that was certainly an entertaining and different thing that we encountered last year. Just the people you get to meet, I think, whether it's in the organization, outside the organization, have always been memorable. Last year, we had Johnny Bench come to one of our games as part of a grassroots baseball organization he was working with, and he's a native Oklahoman. There's a statue of him outside the home plate gate in our ballpark. But meeting him, being able to do a one-on-one interview with him certainly was awesome. And then another Hall of Famer who used to be in the Dodgers organization, who I had a chance to meet once, was Greg Maddux. I remember one time there was a scoring dispute after a game. And so we're talking to the different coaching staffs with the official score and all that. And Greg Maddux happened to be in town. And, he gave his opinion. I'm just thinking in my head, oh my God, Greg Maddux is here, weighing in on if this ball should be a hit or an error. And I'm like, we should probably listen to him, whatever he thinks. So just stuff like that, I just all sorts of different funny travel stuff, which again are kind of first world problems when you're going through them at the time. But in hindsight, you can sit back and laugh about them. Last year, we had all sorts of issues with the air conditioning on one or both of the buses. That it's now, especially given this day, we give anything to be on one of those unair conditioned buses right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But now Maddox, he had to been pulling for it being an error, right? So that doesn't impact the pitcher's ERA or what?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, it was whatever it was. I had already gone into it thinking basically the same kind of things that he was articulating. So I was glad that he saw it the same way as I did.
You've been at the mic for several years. I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff on a baseball field. I have a theory, every time, I watch a baseball game, whether it's at the big league level, at the high school level or what, you're going to see something that you've never seen before and you're never going to see again. So with that, what have been some of your favorite moments calling games, or what has been some things that you've seen, maybe just one time or something?
It's funny. I was just talking about this the other day with someone because we were hosting at our ballpark what's called the Oklahoma All-State Games, for the best high school players in the state. And we saw this one thing happen where the catcher pump faked a pickoff throw down to, it was runners to the corners. He pump faked a pickoff throw down to first base, but the ball came out of his hands on the pump fake and it went to the backstop and the runner from third scored. And I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that before. But some of the other, more unusual things or memorable things I've seen. We had a 19-inning game, 2015, that ended on a walk-off home run by a player who was with us at the time named Buck Britton. And it was a huge game in the final week of the regular season that helped send us to the playoffs. And that was game one of a doubleheader, by the way. So 19 innings in game one and then played game two after that. That day, first pitch, I believe, was at 4:30 or so and ended right around 1 a.m. So that was definitely memorable. And in a
Yeah.
similar
I th-
lengthy extra inning game when I was with High Desert, actually went 21 innings that had to be broken up over 2 days due to curfew. Um, but as I said in my article that I wrote that I referenced earlier, if I had never seen those things because of the uh, extra inning rule in place, the new extra inning rule in place, um, I would not be. It's not like I would rethink my career or anything like that. They were great to see. Um, One of the things, the oddest things, the funniest things that always sticks out in my mind was during my time with High Desert. We involved the Dodgers affiliate, which was Inland Empire at the time. There was a game in High Desert where it was in extra innings. Inland Empire's out of pitching. They have a position player pitch. Infielder by the name of Adolfo Gonzalez gives up a walk-off home run. It was 1 month to the day, so I think it was May 6th and then June 6th, that now we're playing in Inland Empire, and Adolfo Gonzalez hit a walk-off home run in extra innings. And that's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that it was Buck Britton. Is that Zach's brother?
He is, yes. And Buck Britton, I believe, now is a manager in either, I think, the Orioles organization.
Okay,
So yeah,
yeah.
he's a double A, single A, or double A manager now.
Okay, I remember seeing about that long game and the walk-off home run on Twitter, and it may have been you tweeting it like we've got another one to go or something.
Yeah. Oh, and another great part of that day. So, like I said, it was a doubleheader. So the double A affiliate for the Dodgers has been in Tulsa, which is just an hour and a half up the road. And they were at home as well. And of course, this first game is going on, and calls were made that basically said, someone's got to get in the car and start driving here because we're not going to have enough pitching for the second game. So a guy by the name of Deck McGuire subsequently did get to the big leagues with a couple of other teams and has also pitched in Korea. He started driving. He drove from Tulsa to OKC. Believe he got into the parking lot right as that first game was ended, and then he pitched the final 3 or 4 innings of the second game. So that was another part of that weird and wacky day.
So now, being a broadcaster, being in the ballpark for all these games, all these players, obviously you've got your home teams and you've got a when you're on the road, you get exposed to the other players. You've got to see a lot or hear a lot of walk-up songs, correct?
Quite a bit. Some are similar. Some you can't. It is kind of hard to tell what it is. Uh, Occasionally, I'll bust out Shazam or Soundhound if there's one that I like and stick it out the window to find out what it is. But yes, I obviously hear a lot of different ones.
I know hanging around, baseball players, younger guys, a big topic that we'll always kind of discuss, especially in the off season as guys are preparing for the season, is like, what is my walk-up song going to be this year? They got to think about it. Some guys maybe stick with the same one year after year. Other guys keep it fresh. Some guys, I remember Matt Kemp with the Dodgers, he would have like a different walk-up song each at bat.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so have you ever given any thought about what your walk-up song would be? And if so, what is it?
I have only because I've been asked this question a few times before. So it's the same song that when I was in college, in addition to doing some sports broadcasting stuff, I did some music broadcasting stuff as well. So for the final, I think, 3 years of when I was in college, I host a weekly radio show, music show, and it always started with the same song, and it's a song called "Calling Out" by the artist Lyrics Born. So it starts with these people singing, "People, are you ready? Let's start the show." So that's I'm not a good singer, so you can look that up if you want. But that would be my walk-up song.
Would that
And
be
they
the
would be very disappointed once I stepped in the batter's box.
would that be the same for entrance music if you were a pitcher, or would you have a different song for pitcher entrance music?
different song, and that one would be the opening guitar riff in "Money for Nothing" by Dire Straits.
Okay. So no love for Nelly out of the Lou or what?
Not really. I mean, obviously Nelly, he put St. Louis on the map, and of course, fellow St. Louisan, and of course, I have a lot of love for him and everything. But I don't think I'd go with any Nelly.
Now, what was your music show about? Did you have a genre that you did on there?
Yeah, it was mostly uh, hip hop and electronic music. So I don't really listen to the electronic music so much, but the hip hop I played was either older stuff or more independent stuff. I'm not really up to date with the independent stuff like I was back then, but yeah, that's what I played.
The new stuff just can't hold a candle to that older stuff, can it?
It's different. It's so much different these days, and I'm not an expert by any means, and I was thinking about it a little bit and what's kind of changed and all that, and I think it's just the music industry now, because before, you had to play shows, you had to get noticed, and now anybody can make songs, put them on social media in YouTube, and that's how people are found now. So anyone can make their own beats and all that stuff. um, so yeah, just technology has changed everything. It's a lot like baseball. it's just
Yeah.
it's just changed the game a whole lot.
Well, and any idiot with a microphone and an internet connection can start a podcast.
Or have a SoundCloud page. Yeah.
So who are some of those top who are your top hip hop artists? You got a top 5 of all time?
I don't want to label it necessarily as top five, because I don't want to get into any debates or anything like that. But definitely some of my favorites: Gangstar, Guru and Premier, Biggie. I think he was probably my favorite. Still is kind of that early mid '90s era. Wu-Tang Clan, love Wu-Tang, and not only as a collective, but so many of those individual artists. Nas, especially Illmatic, which is my favorite hip hop album of all time. And then some of the more kind of some of those West Coast guys that were a little bit more, uh, gosh, hardcore is not the right word, but just it was a heavier kind of music. So Ice Cube, N.W.A.,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dre, Snoop, Ghetto Boys, all those guys as well.
What are the popular songs in AAA clubhouses these days?
Oh,
Or maybe the genre. What genre is most
yes.
common?
Uh, gosh, it. You never know. It could be country. It could be uh, Latino music. It could be current hip hop. The thing that I kind of have heard a lot that I would not expect is electronic and dance music. That's more prevalent than I would have expected, not only in the clubhouse, but also for guys' walk up songs. There's some of the bigger like DJs these days and all that stuff. Uh, but yeah, a lot of it also depends on, like, they'll defer to the starting pitcher if he
Mm-hmm.
wants a certain kind of music to be playing that day. But yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag.
Does OKC have a winning song that they play? I know in LA, when the Dodgers win, as soon as that final out hits, we get Randy Newman, "I Love LA." Do they have an anthem that they play there on wins?
There is a victory song. It's something about Oklahoma Sky, and it's a male singer country song. That's what's played after wins on the
Okay.
field.
Do you have any other thoughts that you would like to share with us, with our listeners?
I don't think so. Just keep your thoughts for all the people who've been affected by the minor league baseball situation this year. some of these teams will not recover and might not have teams moving forward, whether it's because of the economic impact or because of the plan to cut down the amount of minor league teams heading into next season. And I think just in general, there's so much, whether it's the minor leagues, whether it's the major leagues, there's so much that goes behind the scenes every single day, whether it's from the actual team side, whether it's from hosting the event itself of having fans in the stadium. It is a huge production every day, of course, even more so at the big league level than it is at the minor league level. And without a lot of hardworking people behind that, it doesn't happen. So yeah, a lot of people who are involved in the success of teams, both on and off the field. And that, if I could just do a little shameless plug for my Twitter account, at AZ Freedman, AZFREEDMAN. Fairly active on there. I'm sure I will be even more so when the major league games get up and running. But feel free to say hi. Tell me how much you thought I was how boring I was, or how much I stunk on this podcast, or if any of my baseball opinions are trash. But yeah, I'll always love hearing from the Dodger fans near and far, and making those connections and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points about minor league baseball. I know, I have grown up in LA my whole life, being in a big league city, but I know that minor league baseball is a great way to expose the game to fans across the country who may not be so close to the big league city, since there's only 30 of them. It's a way to reach that. And the main point is obviously developing the players to be ready for the big leagues, but you also develop, fans from a young age who are unable to have access to that big league, exposure. And, we have the California League is somewhat local.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a summer camp for pretty much all my life, and it's in San Bernardino, not far from, currently the Inland Empire 66ers. We've been taking kids to, those games for several years, and it's always a great experience. We'll have sometimes, 100 kids at those games. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, it is unfortunate to see no minor league baseball season this year. Everyone who has been affected by it, hopefully they're able to bounce back. And yeah, it is disappointing. Unfortunately, we're probably going to lose some teams, but yeah, hopefully, along with all the other sports, minor league baseball can bounce back next year. Alex, it's been great having you on the show. I love the points that you bring, a lot of great, all that great perspective that you've brought, and it was a joy to have you on. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Billy. Really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share some stories, and best of luck with this unique podcast you've got.
Thank you. And again, you can follow Alex. The Twitter handle is at AZFriedman. And your website, it was medium.com slash
Beyond the Bricks. Yeah, I
Beyond
wouldn't
the
call it
Bricks.
necessarily my website, but yeah, just myself is something we do kind of to write feature stories or other stories about the Dodgers organization. I did a couple of pieces about the first 5 years of Dodgers affiliation in Oklahoma City, highlighting some of the great moments and taking a look by the numbers, and like recently did that piece about the extra inning games as well.
All right. So thank you, and good luck going forward. Again, this is Billy Ballas. My Twitter handle is at WBallas, and our podcast, Boxy Banter, we're on Twitter and Instagram, reachable on both those platforms at Boxseat Banter. You can also check out the blog, boxseatbanter.com. I've got links to all of the rosters that I've created, along with stats for all of those teams, so you can check those out. Get caught up on all the episodes. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast apps. This is Billy Ballas of Boxseat Banter, signing off.